Welcome to another edition, special edition of the DDS Squad, the Do Dope Shit Squad podcast. Last week, or actually just the other day, I released the podcast featuring Ryan Conrad and myself venturing to Worcester, Massachusetts for Beyond Wrestling Uncharted Territory, episode 14. And this episode here, it will be a little bit different. It won't be a recap. It won't be us at a wrestling show. Well, technically we are. This is the sit-down conversation with John Feast from Beyond Wrestling and Feast Sandwich Company. I really had a great time sitting and talking with John, and we got a really, really good backstory of how he came to Beyond Wrestling and some other bits of knowledge here in this one. He also gave us 2 sets of tickets to give away for Americanrana. So stay tuned to the end of the podcast to find out how you can win a set, giving away 2 sets of general admission tickets for Beyond Americanrana, July 28th, Foxwoods Resort Casino. So without further ado, here's our conversation with John. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, we're back. And we just had a great time here at Beyond, and we're just sitting down with John as I've teased a little bit here about this interview, or conversation I'd rather have, because I had an interview. I'm not really an interviewer, so I figured we'll just bullshit, shoot the shit here for a bit. How you doing?
How's it going, guys? I'm doing excellent. Just finished a great episode of Uncharted Territory, episode 14, and we've been working the long game toward Americanrana, and it's great to see that the stories are finally, referee Stephen Dumang, the man, stories are finally coming together so that we see a clear path towards Americanrana, and we're hoping that there's been some good twists and turns where
absolutely
the things that you think you're going to see don't actually happen, and then, we do some shit to get to where we want to be that is pretty creative and fun. And,
absolutely. It was a great show tonight, too, just like every week, but this crowd, too, man. Like I said, everything's packed. Probably one of the biggest ones you've had in here, right?
This is our biggest crowd so far, but we've probably been able to say that every week since week 1, with the exception of like when the Bruins were playing for the championship. But I mean, if the benchmark becomes, Sean Spears at episode 10, well, that when that happened, we couldn't believe how many people showed up. And when you look at the attendance, it's like this is a Wednesday night. Wrestling is traditionally Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Right. Wednesday night is generally a work night, and people aren't actually accustomed to going out on Wednesday to watch wrestling. So we're actually building a culture here, which is really cool.
You're retraining people. That's what it comes down to.
And as Drew mentioned it earlier in the ring, but when you throw back to like Jack Witchies in the 70s and 80s, where it becomes wrestling night. And I think we're pretty much solidly, cementing ourselves as Wednesday night being wrestling night.
Yeah, and hopefully for the future forward, too. I know we got 4 more weeks scheduled right now, and an uncertain future after that.
Yeah, Uncharted Territory is scheduled to go through the 31st of July, which would be essentially the Uncharted Territory after Americanrana is scheduled to end the season. And then it really becomes a re-evaluate the landscape of what's happening, both internally and externally. So we have to take a step back and look at, what changes can we make logistically, financially, to go forward with the season 2, and what is everybody else doing? What's Wednesday Night Dynamite? How is that going?
Right,
why beat around the bush? When is AEW going to be on TV? And it's a hell of a lot easier for us to move a night than it is for them.
Right. And it's you don't want to go up against them off the bat anyway, because they're just going to have that wave of momentum going in the first couple months.
And a huge chunk. We share so much of the same roster.
Absolutely.
Our and the crazy thing is, they're established as almost they're received differently through the crowds. But like Joey Janela's main eventing Americanrana. He main evented Uncharted Territory tonight. 3 days ago, he wrestled John Moxley
in the main event.
Of a day. That's a crazy thought. I personally feel like Beyond Wrestling doesn't get the credit that it should for creating the wrestlers that it does. I think that, we'll say it amongst each other, But if you want to watch NXT TakeOver 2021, watch Americanrana at the end of this month.
Absolutely. We've only been around for a few years, but we haven't seen much of Donovan Dijak in NXT, but he was a big guy for us. And we've seen Riddle come out. We've seen...
Oh my God. The list goes on and on. Biff Busick, Oni Lorcan.
Marty Stone.
And I mean, like right now, Orange Cassidy is the biggest independent wrestler on the planet.
Right.
He's not even aware of how huge he is.
No.
But he's the only wrestler outside of
that's
WWE.
character.
Yeah, right.
So live your character.
And the thing is, I think that the character's kind of taken on a life of its own because I don't know that the current incarnation is the intended incarnation.
It really isn't, because I went back and I watched the match from WrestleMania weekend a couple years ago with the tag match, him and Martina versus Penelope and Joey. And oh my gosh, it was just from there to now, it's such a huge change in him.
I mean, that's just a story that you can follow that narrative. And like, I hate when I hear people like Jim Cornette say, well, the person's not talented enough so that they have to do these hands in the pocket things.
Yeah.
Orange Cassidy is such a great wrestler. People don't even realize it because he doesn't have to do it because he's so incredibly over without it.
Yeah.
But when push comes to shove, he's a fantastic wrestler.
They're not less talented, they're more talented because they can add that to it and not just rely on the work.
100%. Same thing with somebody like Anthony Green. Like,
oh my God.
His character is tailor-made for that next step through Evolve at NXT and WWE. But at the end of the day, the dude is a great worker. And he's able to build that character because he has so much confidence in his work
building
ability.
Such a great reputation with working with these people on the Retribution tour.
2 days ago, he wrestled Tyler Breeze. Tonight, he's here in Worcester wrestling The Patriot. It's crazy.
And in a couple weeks, he's going to be on the WWE Network.
Yeah, he's wrestling Josh Briggs.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's do you want to get into a little bit about how you got involved with Beyond?
Sure. So it's actually a great story. So I've been a wrestling fan for my whole life. I'm 39 years old, so I grew up through what would be considered the worst eras in WWF, but I loved it. The 93, 94, 95, they've written books about how bad it is.
That's when I got into it.
And I loved it. And I followed it through probably until I went to college. And then I became a bit of a lapsed fan.
Yep.
I went on to become an entrepreneur, start businesses. I follow wrestling probably the way a lot of people my age do, whereas for like a decade I just read it. I didn't even watch it. I just read it.
Yeah.
What happened on Raw? Let me read it. I'd watch the Royal Rumble every year because I just love the Rumble.
Yeah, right.
Mania season, right?
Yeah, like, there was years I didn't watch SmackDown because it was taped and you could just read what happened the night before.
Yeah, exactly. Or they would do they would do 4-episode grips and all that stuff. So I became kind of a lapsed fan, but I always paid attention to what was going on, and I've been aware of indie wrestling forever. Funny enough, I look at like the marketing of indie companies as far as what I'm drawn to. So like, I don't watch anything where it's like your logo is like a blood drip letter or an anarchy symbol for an A. Like that stuff loses me. But when companies like PWG started coming around with like unique names and marketing, and Chikara was doing the cool things that they were doing, like, it started to pique my interest. And then I discovered Beyond probably around Biff Busick, Matt Tremont, and when they were doing the lead up to Chris Dickinson, Michael Elgin, the Untouchable series and all that they were doing. So I became aware of it, but I followed it loosely in that I didn't go to the shows, but if it popped up on Reddit or something, I'd be interested, or I'd read in like The Observer or something if it was mentioned. And then Beyond started running shows in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, and I own a restaurant in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. Yeah. And it was a bummer for me because as a restaurant, my busiest days are Saturdays and Sundays, so I knew that they were coming to town, but I couldn't go to the show. But the fans would come and eat at my restaurant quite a bit, and a big part of my decor is just old school wrestling stuff that I just love on the walls. I think it just looks great. We have a belt hanging. I have Ric Flair autographs all throughout. I have the 85 Topps card series on the wall. It's a decor that I enjoy. Yeah. So I wound up serving some of the girls who worked the door for Beyond, and they went back and told Drew, hey, that restaurant down the street, the owner must be a wrestling fan. And so Drew came in one day to eat by himself, and I had no idea I didn't know who he was. but he was wearing a Beyond hoodie.
Yeah.
So just in the same conversation that I have with everybody who comes into my restaurant, I always look for some kind of way to align and bridge conversation to kind of build a rapport. And I just said, hey, are you a fan of Beyond Wrestling? Because I knew it was now something we could talk about. And he was like, well, actually, I'm the founder and owner of Beyond Wrestling. And I was like, well, let's me and you have a conversation.
Absolutely.
So we started talking. This was a year ago in May we met.
Okay.
So my business does not spend traditional advertising dollars. Before we went on air, we were talking about radio ads and things like that. I have always been a fan of grassroots organic marketing and directing those dollars in ways that other people wouldn't think of. So in just talking with Drew upon meeting him, the idea of, hey, why don't I throw advertising dollars at a wrestling show instead of a newspaper ad or a fucking billboard? What if I did a wrestling show in my parking lot?
Yeah.
And, you know, if my car count is 10,000 on a Sunday, all of those people are going to see a wrestling ring and a show going on, and it's going to immediately spark interest, and I'm going to have 1,000 conversations in the days that follow about what the fuck were we doing in our parking lot. And it becomes a way better use of advertising dollars.
Oh, yeah.
So Drew was into it, and to his credit, I said, this is the card that I want. And I got nothing that I didn't want.
That's awesome.
for the money that I paid for it, and I even said flat out, this is what I can afford to pay for the show, for advertising, and this is who I want. I want Joey Ryan, I want Colt Cabana, I want Swaggle, I want Orange Cassidy, I want The Colony, I want all of these comedy acts that are kind of like food centric. I want Puff, I want Dick Justice.
And we had the donut.
Yeah, the donut match, the thumbtack donut spot, the greatest.
I got Janela's lollipop.
Anthony Green is staring over your shoulder right now.
AG, what's up, man?
Whenever there's a microphone, I'm always lurking.
Well, hey, nice to stop by.
The retrosexual Anthony Green is a good personal friend of mine, actually. And,
Yes.
He is. We were just talking about how proud we are of you for all of your recent accomplishments.
Aw.
And your upcoming WWE Network debut.
Isn't that exciting? Honestly, I can say I wouldn't be anywhere with Beyond Wrestling, and more specifically, without John.
Yeah.
John got me everywhere.
Yes, I got him everywhere in the 6 months that I've known him. I've taken him to new heights. Meanwhile, he's on the fucking WWE Network.
Start the rocket to the back and let it go, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, to get back to as part of doing the show, Drew also had a need where he was doing concessions. What's up, brother man? Bear Bronson is. You want one of these?
I want one.
What are you, 2X?
Yes.
Mitchell, I'll get you one before you leave. Don't worry about it. Sorry, so
That's an awesome shirt.
Drew, yeah, I love that. So this shirt I wanted for myself, but I couldn't
Pastamania
find-
Hogan
yeah,
shirt.
it's a great shirt. So anyway, so we did the show in my parking lot, and then Drew's mother and father would traditionally do the concessions for him.
Yeah.
But he was, in running the food truck through the summer months, he was having trouble with them always being available. So he asked me if I would help him do some concessions on some shows, and we kind of worked out a barter.
Okay.
To where, like, for example, we did a Feast Championship Wrestling title match with Cheeseburger versus Dick Justice on a show, and the barter was I would do the concessions at the show and use that as a means of advertisement for the restaurant. So I started doing the concessions, and I kind of took a step back and I said, okay, I feel like I can add value to this production.
Right.
Not that there's already not tremendous value that exists, because there is. There's 1.5 million YouTube subscribers and 100,000 social media subscribers across all platforms.
And those numbers in
Yes.
themselves are absolutely
They're astronomical.
Yeah, amazing.
So I'm not going to kid myself and say, well, I can enhance that, because I can't.
Right.
But I can add value to the details, because Drew's was for so long a one-man show that the details kind of fall by the wayside. So when looking at where I can add value, I look at things like the bar and the food. I can do that, take that stress completely away from him, and focus on that, and then provide a better experience for the guest. Excuse me. Then I can look at how do we provide a better experience for the performer. You know, I can do things like booking out their travel or their hotel, or making sure that there's water stocked in the locker rooms, and just those little things that you just sometimes forget.
Can I just interject for a second? And I don't want to leave anything, but I was listening to David Starr's podcast for We the Independent, and he was talking about these important details that they're really trying to push. And water was, he said water 4 or 5 times during the podcast. He was making the point that sometimes the back room doesn't have water for the talent. And talking about food and everything else. I'm sorry.
No, and it happens a lot, and I don't even think that you can really fault the promoter for it, because it's just one of those things that you, in a day where you're doing 50,000 things, picking up a case of water might just be get for guy.
Right.
So in the locker rooms where I'm managing the shows, I make sure there's water and food.
Yeah.
And with Drew running the show, and I mean nothing ill towards Drew at all, but having one man run the show, there's a lot of pieces that you're managing, and you might be managing them well. But if you had enough, if you can give up a little bit of power, and I can speak to that with my job, that's the same way, where you just have to, if you can just give away a little bit and get some help, then that will be able to get you in a place to where you work better as a team than trying to be a one-man show.
So that's essentially what I'm trying to do, just fill those gaps. And one of the things that I can help with is merchandise, and that it doesn't take much more than injecting a little bit of time and resources into improving the merchandise. So that's what I did. So it's those details. I feel like have made the live event experience better. And so the first event that we did together, where I was co-promoting the show with Drew, was the Treasure Hunt tournament.
Yep.
And
in
East Greenwich.
Restaurant.
And my goal for that show was to just find profitability in the live event. It's like a very simple goal, and it doesn't happen in indie wrestling at all. No. A lot of times you rely on back-end resources like YouTube ad revenue. So you take a loss up front, hoping to recoup it on the back end. But I wholeheartedy believe that I can find profitability in the live event. So we decided to operate that show with 10 people. Those 10 people wrestled. We did a tournament. That's how you get there.
Yep.
Instead of having 35 guys on the show, you do 10.
Yep.
You bring in one big star, and that was Lisa Marie Verone. And then you have your homegrown talent: Chris Dickinson, Josh Briggs, Anthony Green, Chris Statlander. And you just kind of gather a data sample to see if you find profitability, and then you look at the things that you need to focus on to enhance that going forward. Thank you. I appreciate it. So we did. We found profitability in the Treasure Hunt tournament, and I said, okay, well, now we know the bar will generate this with what we did, the merch will generate this with what we did, the door will generate this, and the food will generate this. So now when we look at our next event, if we can figure out how to exponentially grow those four things, we can now do a bigger event. So the next event, the follow-up to that, was the Lethal Lottery.
Yes.
So I got really spoiled in the Treasure Hunt tournament in that we sat down to write that show, and exactly what we wrote on day one is exactly what the result turned out to be.
And that doesn't happen all the time.
Apparently it never happens, because I haven't seen it since.
Talk about being spoiled. You get into that, this is a piece of cake.
Yeah, I was like, this is so easy. And then Lethal Lottery happened.
Yeah.
And Lethal Lottery probably required 7 or 8 rewrites. I got the idea for Lethal Lottery because I'm a big-time memorabilia collector.
Right.
But at this point in the game, I look for, like, random things that nobody else would own. And I'd like to be clear right now, Cody Rhodes started buying trademarks after I started buying trademarks. So I bought the Lethal Lottery trademark, and a week later he bought Battle Ball.
Wow.
And I reached out to him a few times to try and give him the Lethal Lottery trademark, and I never heard back from him. But he can have it if it's important to him. But I wanted to own the trademark on that because I thought it was cool, and I knew that Court Bauer had bought War Games.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And I was like, man, a trademark is something I can buy for memorabilia where I'll be the only person in the world that has it.
Like I never thought about that.
And it's just a really cool piece of memorabilia.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So I was watching old Lethal Lotteries, and I've always loved like the weird gimmick match.
Yep.
And the randomly drawn tag teams. I just kind of, and I was like, you know what? And then I just sent Drew a text, and I was like, hey man, I am gonna buy the Lethal Lottery trademark. How do you feel about running the Lethal Lottery? And he was like, well, let's do it. So
that's cool.
Bought the trademark. Own that. I actively own that piece of wrestling history, and it's actually come up a few times since where other shows are running the Lethal Lottery, and they'll reach out to me and say, "Is it all right?"
Oh wow!
It hit like the Observer and Figure 4 that trademark that I had. My name was on the trademark, obviously, so that became like wrestling news.
Yep.
And Cody was buying up all these trademarks, so it became like, well, this guy's like trying to undercut Cody, and I'm like, no, I bought it first.
Right.
and he can have it. I don't.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with him. It was more for you, your memorabilia.
So I was like, well, let's make this piece of memorabilia a living, breathing thing, and let's do the Lethal Lottery. And that show probably required 10 to 12 rewrites, all the way up until 3 minutes before the door opened.
One of the guys was sick, right?
We had a guy get sick. Who the day of, he woke up with a stomach flu.
Oh, this is the one that was on.
30 to 40% of the show was written around that guy.
Yeah.
All right, what do we do now?
It was on
Another guy, but it didn't.
Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo.
That was the one that was on Cinco de Mayo.
We had another guy who was coming in. It was just a series of things just went wrong where it's like, all right, if we move this component to account for that component, we then lose this component, so we have to move another component to account for that component, and eventually there's going to be a hole somewhere that we don't have the capability of filling unless we grab a mask from the merch table and create a new character or something. So you start reaching out to people, and the solution, the butterfly effect of one guy getting the stomach flu the morning of Lethal Lottery meant VSK came down from New York to do the Josh Briggs Open Challenge for his return. So like that was like 6 steps to get to that point.
Okay.
All started with a guy waking up with the stomach flu.
That's crazy.
And the stress of delayed flights. So when you do Sunday shows, you do them earlier in the day.
Yep.
So a lot of these flights land around 2 o'clock.
Wasn't PWG the night before?
PWG was the night before. We had,
So you had a lot of guys on that card that were on the same card.
Joey Ryan was coming in. His flight got delayed by an hour. So it's like, all right, Joey Ryan's going to come in after doors are open. Like, I can't hold doors and hold the live,
Right.
You guys have all probably been on flights where they get delayed.
Yes.
What do you do? All right, we already have our match order. We're already working out matches. Like, it kind of is what it is. You hope that he can come in, and these guys are pros, so they can call it in the ring, or they can, work out a 2 or 3 minute thing. But if you watch the Lethal Lottery back, there's some points where the curtain is a little transparent, and you can see guys working through shit. And that's because their flights landed late. And it's like, all right, we got to figure. We usually, before a show, you have time in the ring to work out your stuff, but that didn't exist. Thank you, Steve. So like those components are like crazy, but again, we ran the Lethal Lottery, and I knew that if I knew we were looking at Foxwoods before Lethal Lottery happened. I had gotten approached by a company that runs events at another casino, and they wanted to come and watch our shows and kind of critique it, but I felt like they were stringing us along just to kind of learn the process a little bit.
Okay.
So I said, well, I'll just call Foxwoods.
Yeah.
And I called Foxwoods, and I said, all right, I need to get on the phone with somebody who I feel like I can, create a rapport with. And professional wrestling is a tough sell in any arena.
Oh, yeah.
When we did Lethal Lottery at Wide World of Indoor Sports, up until right before the show, they thought that we were doing Olympic wrestling.
Oh my God.
They didn't know that it was professional wrestling. After we made the agreement on everything, and then I said, so the ring comes in pieces, and the guy goes, what do you mean the ring? And he goes, oh, this isn't like Olympic wrestling? And I was like, no, sir, this is completely different. So like that.
Okay.
So you're up against those
There's
challenges.
a stigma there. So
There's a huge
I hate
stigma.
to say, like, you're not hiding anything. They didn't ask the question.
It's really hard to work past that stigma, and it's really hard for me as a successful business person to be up against that, because I'm never up against that in real life. I'm usually the one that's pursued by beer distributors, by food representatives. For me to go say, hey, I'm doing wrestling, it's like it's something that I've never thought I'd ever be up against, but I'm hoping that the fact that I can approach these things with professionalism will help close that gap. So when I called Foxwoods, I spoke to a woman who I was just like explaining what we were looking to do. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, all right, thank you, goodbye, hung up. Figured I have to call back, and I have to just keep talking until I get to somebody.
Like putting your foot in the door.
Yeah, so I called, and I talked to a woman, and I just kept talking, and I was like, ma'am, can I please speak to somebody, to your supervisor? You're not doing anything wrong, but I would just like to try and explain this to somebody else to get a sec. And I finally, I repeated that process 3 or 4 times, and this guy answered the phone, and I said, hey, my name is John. I own a restaurant in East Greenwich, Rhode Island called Feast, and I work with Beyond Wrestling. And he goes, oh, Beyond Wrestling, the guys that run in the Armory in East Greenwich? He's like, yeah, you guys work with Feast. He's like, I love Feast. I go there all the time.
Bingo.
And I was like, sir, what is your title? He's like, oh, I'm the live events manager here at Foxwoods. And I was like, all right, great. I own Feast. So let's now have a conversation. And he's like, yeah, you guys can for sure do wrestling. It's great. And Drew and I were standing in the ballroom in Foxwoods 4 days later, and I signed a contract that night.
That's awesome.
So it's just a matter of just being persistent about it.
Yeah.
But going into Lethal Lottery, not to kind of circle back around, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do bar and food at Foxwoods. So I had to focus on merchandise. Merchandise is our only opportunity to pick up an extra revenue stream at Foxwoods. So that's when I started focusing on the huge merchandise setups and the tons of options. And it worked really well at Lethal Lottery, so I doubled down for Foxwoods. So I'm hoping to... Our profit's going to live in the merch at Foxwoods.
Okay.
You know, depending on the gate, because there's no bar or food, it's gonna live and die in the merch. We need to do, it's easy. We could have probably sold as many tickets as we have now, just the merits of Americanrana at Foxwoods, but that's not the way that we want to do it. We want to say this is the card.
Yeah, you want to go a little bit bigger, and you want to go.
It's the sickest independent card that's been put together in years.
Yeah.
And I will stand by that statement against any card that exists out there. You can look at your Bolas, you can look at your Spring Breaks, you can look at your Triple Manias. I will tell you straight up, Americanrana is the best card that's been. 2019 Americanrana is the best card in indie wrestling in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's shaping up, and you guys are building up storyline-wise, which is another thing that doesn't exist in independent wrestling.
Doesn't happen.
You're building up storylines to get you to Americanrana.
If it happens accelerated 4 months out, where you shoot the whole angle in one night, and it's just kind of a jumbled mess. Or it's done on like social media where it'll get kind of lost in the shuffle. We've done a slow build storyline-wise. Thomas Santella and Nick Gage had their first stare down on like episode 7 of Uncharted Territory. They just crossed paths. One leaving the ring, one walking to the ring.
It's that little thing that
they had a glance.
Yeah, you wouldn't pick up on it.
So,
now you're looking back and you're so pissed.
So we've gone from a glance to now they've formed a bond tonight.
Yep.
And we're heading into a situation where Santel may need a tag team partner.
Yes.
So it's like that, like 2-3 month build is something that like doesn't exist in indie wrestling. So that's how we've been able. You know, we can tell a great story of Joey Janela and David Starr in an Iron Man match, and we can now run the same exact main event 3 years in a row.
You've got the built-in story there.
The story exists.
And this could very well be the last time you see Joey Janela and David Starr with AEW in the background here.
Exactly. So, and that's a very good point. Like, at some point, it's going to become, all right, we're paying Joey Janela so much money. He needs to not do these shows.
Right, exactly.
So is this his last stand? What's the deal with David Starr? Like, you know, he does the independent thing, but he's very adamant in saying he's not anti-contract.
Right.
You say that enough times, it makes me feel like you might be pro-contract. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
No,
I know we're getting there, but I have to stop because we skipped over the secret show when we were talking about Rana after Lethal Lottery, and I don't want to dismiss this because first we started with Destination Uncharted Territory. And that was your great show that was easy.
Yes.
Right? And then you get Lethal Lottery, and now you're going, and now it's completely more like it's more real, I guess would be whatever, right? Like, but then you now are into a spot where you're doing a secret show, so you're not announcing.
The secret show is the easiest show I've ever done because I did nothing with it. I did merchandise for the secret show.
Okay.
Drew put together that entire show by himself.
Okay.
And it was one of those things where I was like kind of in awe by him doing it. I didn't know the card until 2 or 3 days before.
Wow. I don't think he gets enough credit.
Chris, I need you to sign those for me, brother.
So all right, that being the case, and
Drew also, just so we're clear, writes about 100% of Uncharted Territories.
We do credit he deserves.
I'm lucky enough to be in like a text chain with him where he runs it all by me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I read it and I'm just like, well, fuck, it looks done. looks done to me.
It's a sounding board at that point.
And then sometimes I'll read something and I'll question it and I'll just say, hey, well, this is kind of weird. And then he'll shoot me his logic and I'm like, all right, well, perfect. Like, fine.
Yeah.
In the entirety of Uncharted Territory, I've contributed minimal. I've thrown some suggestions out for opponents that have gotten picked up. I may or may not have suggested a box be used at some point. And next week, actually, the 10th is like the first segment that I've written entirely.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome.
And not for lack of pitching, because I've pitched a lot of things, but I also don't have the experience.
No, right.
When you're talking to Drew and Chris Dickinson and you guys know Lance Liquid, Alan Schmalman.
Oh, yeah.
And Jerry from IWTV,
yep.
yeah, Vin Gerard. These guys have a lot more experience than I do, so their ideas of how to get there are sometimes a lot better than mine. So a lot of times I'm just absorbing,
right?
Because I know that I have the capacity to absorb, learn, and react. Mm-hmm. So eventually, my ideas are going to be fantastic. And it's taken to episode 15 for one of my ideas to make it to television, and I'm pretty pumped for it.
Yeah, I don't think that's short. With regards to, I want to get this one out because I've been sitting on this for a while. We talked about it a little bit when we were there at the Secret Show. So the card, I guess, can be fluid and it can move and everything, and nobody knows. And so I guess there's a little bit of like the stress is taken away on that part. But we're in a social media world. How do you get the performer? How do you get the talent to agree that they're not going to tweet or not forget or what have you, or just anything? Retweets can mean nothing and they can mean everything, right?
They can. And
I've learned Twitter is a valuable tool.
You learned that the hard way.
Twitter is. Would you like me to introduce you to Chris Dickinson?
I got him a Diet Coke after he asked for one, so we're good.
You can say his name again.
Twitter, wrestling lives on Twitter. Oddly enough, it's like a weird petri dish of professional wrestling fandom and performers where it lives there. And some things that happen, like with the Secret Show, when I tell you it's a lot harder to get guys to tweet than it is to not get them to tweet.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times these guys are so busy and they have such full schedules and they're really living from a notepad in their phone to the next note. They don't remember to tweet anyway. So
when Orange says somebody told me to say something.
Told me to say this. So when we do every locker room meeting, it always is guys, please let everybody know how to watch it and all those things, because these guys forget. They're busy. They're working out their matches. Tomorrow they're wrestling somebody else somewhere else. So it's not so hard to keep a secret. Unless you're dealing with guys who are like hyper creative, and then at that point you don't want it to be a secret. Like David Starr spoiled the Secret Show a little bit if you were paying attention, because he's like, hey, secret's out, I'm here. But that guy's hyper creative, so you just let him do what he's going to do.
Right.
Or R.D. Evans, we knew that match was going to be at Americanrana 7 minutes after he quit.
Really?
I text Drew as soon as he quit, the night of him quitting. And I said,
which was a Hall of Fame night, because in case people don't know, because he was the writer on the segment for Bret Hart's Hall of Fame induction.
And he mentioned Vince McMahon. How stupid is that?
Yeah.
So he quits. I text Drew, R.D. Evans just quit. He texts me back instantly, on it for 3 minutes now. And we're literally, as this is live happening, and then he texts me, all right, R.D. Evans wants to wrestle one match. He wants to wrestle Orange Cassidy. All right. Who's going to get it? Is it going to be us? Is it going to be Chikara? It's going to probably be one of those two promotions, because, Orange Cassidy works both. R.D. Evans is kind of, mixed martial arts, and Archibald Peck. That all comes from the Chikara universe that it exists in. But we have this stage that's coming up that if he wants to get eyeballs on his only match, he can do it with Chikara, but it's not going to have the big match feel of a Foxwoods thing. We wound up getting that match, but he produced his own creativity leading up to it with his videos of we'll wrestle Orange Cassidy for food. That was all him creatively, and it's like, all right, well, you just left WWE writing team. We're not going to tell you how to fucking you know what you're doing.
And they've been entertaining bits.
Really good bits to get to where we're going, and it's like that match. While it didn't have the legs that I thought it would have, it's a big deal of a match to me, and that's really all that matters.
Absolutely.
So things like that, like Thomas Santel is doing his own creative right now for his tag team partner against Brian Alvarez and Tom Waller, where he's producing these cool videos. Bye, Michelle. No worries.
You're fine.
I'll see you next week, kid.
Great stuff tonight.
So Thomas Santel is producing his own creative for his tag team partner, and Didn't even know he was doing it until I saw it on Twitter. I watched it as everybody else did, and I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a guy who was in WWE in 2001. Like, these guys have the experience. When Ken Doane comes here and he says, the way to do this match is to do this, and it's like, well, who are we to fucking say you're wrong? You're obviously right.
You've been there.
And it's that ability to not micromanage the situation that leads to the success that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some of Ken Doane's Twitter and just taking a quick look because I started to really appreciate his work the last few weeks.
Ken Doane's an amazing performer.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't get the credit that he's due. I think he had like a really weird run in the WWE the first time, and then he had like that nostalgia run.
He had some tweets where he was talking about almost like helping to train guys and saying, you want to learn how to react. Watch America's Funniest Home Videos. Watch how people react. That's real.
Is that like people are gonna? Is that show still on?
I know.
How do you watch it?
Right? Yeah, really. That's a great question. Yeah, YouTube. Everything's on YouTube, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like, you look at things like that. It's like, all right, collectively, these shows are kind of put together by committee, match to match, which is really cool. It's like, you guys are having this match. Here's the amount of time you have. What do you want to do? And very rarely, like, I've sat in on a lot of locker room meetings with Drew, and I've maybe heard him say twice, like, why don't you guys do this? And that's over the course of hundreds of matches.
Just let the guys be creative. That's what's most important.
That's what's special about Beyond, and that's why these guys go on to NXT and now AEW and Evolve contracts, because they're allowed to showcase who they are.
And I think part of what we're hearing now with WWE's kind of change and downfall, if you call it that, is that a lot of the wrestlers don't feel like they're allowed to be creative, that they're handed a script from somebody that's been written for them.
Brother, I'll say it.
So seeing it here, being it done the way that the wrestlers have for years been doing it is refreshing.
And, they're going to be micromanaged, right? I mean,
it almost makes it
feels like
when you watch like the guys who like you get both very proud and then kind of sad when you see what I don't want to say what becomes of these guys, because they're living their dreams and they're out there doing great things, and I've had conversations with them about, like, once you give up your character, once you turn it over, essentially. Here's an example. I love Anthony Green. He's a good friend of mine. Yep. We were together yesterday for a few hours. When he wrestles for us, he's the retrosexual Anthony Green.
Yes.
And he's flanked by the Platinum Honeys, and he gets the AG Fucks chance. And that's the character that got him incredibly over. He signed to Evolve, and there he's retro AG without the Honeys. Yep. And it's about 80% of the character that he's capable of, but that's kind of the trade-off.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So we're creeping closer to Americanrana. What do you guys got coming up after that?
So Americanrana, then we got the last Uncharted Territory of Season 1. Then we go into August is kind of an off month, but I think that there's some type of event that's going to happen in August that is not finalized yet, but it's going to be like maybe a WWR show or something along those lines.
Okay.
And then we move into September, and then we have our big follow-up show. So if you look at Americanrana and Lethal Lottery and Secret Show as our pay-per-views, and then, for lack of a better term, we call them our special shows. But they're pay-per-views, I guess.
Yeah, they can definitely be looked at that way.
We have a venue and a date locked down for September.
Okay.
No card to announce or anything, and we're not supposed to announce it, but we're doing September 22nd.
Okay.
Westerly, Rhode Island.
No.
Get the hell out of there. That's where I went to high school.
Patty's Beach Club.
Oh, what?
We're gonna do a beach show September 22nd.
On the beach.
Yeah, but just leave it in the podcast and make people have to listen to find out. Don't be like, this is where
I will not.
Let it be like a little Easter egg.
Yeah.
So I worked there for 5 years.
Oh, nice.
So
you get the connection there.
Yeah. Before I opened Feast, I was the executive chef of Patty's Beach Club for 5 years.
Oh,
and I became very good friends with the owner. And he actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, you're doing this wrestling, like." what do you think? And I was like, I think let's do wrestling. Like,
Damn it, Cody, for buying Bash at the Beach.
exactly. So that was the whole other thing. I was like, what do you call it? But yeah, so we're doing that September 22nd. But we have.
And you're sorry.
No.
But you're past Labor Day, so you've got that like the school's back in, so the crowd's going to be. It's not going to be a beach.
It's
crowd,
really tough to do an outdoor show dead smack in the middle of summer. It's so hot.
It's
so
not
if you
gonna be
do it
talk
late.
about that after.
I'd say it's not going to be too hot, but I remember your parking lot.
Last year was September 16th, so we're going 1 week later and hoping that.
I can only imagine. I wasn't on the mat, like my back on the mat.
I went down.
That's right.
Actually, that was my first time in a ring, and I caught a rogue knee to the head from Johnny Cockstrong, and I felt a little concussed. And I was just laying on a hot mat, and I'm getting massaged by Massage Force, and it's like, wow, this is weird. Like, this is what it's come down to. This is where we're at. Like.
Oh my gosh, I can't even believe what you're telling me.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. It's getting late here. This was a great night. We had a good time here, as always. Love coming up. It's a little bit of a drive for us, but it's definitely worth it when it comes down to it. We love coming up here. So we got Americanrana in 4 weeks, I think is what we figured.
Just under 4 weeks.
So, everybody can still get tickets through you guys on BeyondWrestling.com.
The card is filling out nicely. We've got Janela and Star in the main event in an Iron Man match. And another thing, like Chris Dickinson wins the Lethal Lottery, and if you don't have a platform like this to tell the story of Dickinson's preparation for Daisuke Sakamoto, then it just becomes a collection of random indie events that he's working. But when you can actually piece together Josh Alexander, Eric Stevens, Tom Lawler, Josh Briggs, Sonny Kiss, Matt Justice, and it's like, okay, this guy, good night, brother, this guy is going through a murderer's row of people that would not exist had it not been for the platform of Uncharted Territory. And it's like, okay, the narrative becomes, is he going to do too much to get ready for Sakamoto?
Right.
Has he gone through?
He psyched himself out.
Has he crushed his body to get ready for that? Is it a point where he's going to come into Foxwoods better than he's ever been, or more exhausted than he's ever been?
Yeah, because who knows what Sekimoto's doing on the backside.
And the story with Sakamoto would be, he doesn't come to America often.
No.
He's wrestling 4 times when he's here.
Yeah.
And we're his 4th time. So it's like, once he runs through the gamut of, I think he's wrestling, I want to say Matt Tremont or
I know he's
somebody.
wrestling GCW. I'm not sure the opponent.
So it's like, okay, we're getting Sakamoto's last appearance in the U.S. against Dickinson, who's been on this crazy tear, which in my opinion is the greatest single big fight run-up in the history of independent wrestling.
How that man is not signed somewhere, it's a crime.
There's 2 huge crimes in wrestling, and they both exist within Beyond. Why Chris Dickinson isn't one of the biggest stars on the planet, because he can talk, he can wrestle.
And he's got the look.
He has every component.
Yep.
He should be incredibly famous, and I feel bad that he's not. But I'm also happy that he's with us.
Because we have him, right,
And the other big travesty would be, how is it that Drew Cordero is not writing television for the WWE or somebody? I can't really answer the Chris Dickinson question. I mean, it's probably political or something. Who cares? With the Drew thing, it's like, I feel like he's more valuable to those guys not being there.
Yeah.
And that's criminal when you really think about it, that his value lies in them passing over him and almost a lack of acknowledgement to then poach everything that he does. And that's an injustice that it gets me mad every time I think about it, because it's like, all right, we talked about it earlier, NXT in 2 years is what Beyond is doing today. AEW, the Double or Nothing, the buy-in battle royal, you might as well call that the Beyond battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Jordan Grace. Everybody.
I hit on that as soon as they did the 24/7 belt on WWE. I was like, hey, remember when they did that in match when we were at Rana for the first year? Like when it was our first year, it was 2006.
It was the DDT.
The heavy metal way.
Yeah. And we're like, oh yeah, I remember that.
That dude not being the head of some kind of creative, or at least a contributor, is criminal. It is.
But again, on the flip side, if he was there, we wouldn't have Beyond.
So selfishly, we're good.
We also might have a much better product somewhere.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
We might not need
point.
And you're right in that we wouldn't have Beyond, but I personally feel like, and it's been my experience, that everybody who works really hard deserves to get to that point where they're able to cash in. And Drew's been on a 10-year grind.
Oh my God, yeah.
And he hasn't ever really.
That goes back to what I said earlier. He doesn't get the credit he is due.
I mean, even if you look at how he's grown his YouTube, like,
oh my God,
from 150,000 followers to 1.5 million followers, at the exact time that YouTube decides to demonetize most of wrestling, and while he should be living his best life, he's probably about doing the same as he's always done. It's crazy.
And it probably wasn't unexpected, because that's all the pitfalls that you get when you're working with independent wrestling, right?
He's a genuine genius. Like when I hear him talk, he's a genuine genius. He's a bit of a savant when it comes to this stuff, and I wish that he had a much better due than he has. But it is what it is. I mean, I'm also very fortunate that I get to work with him a lot and learn his thought processes and things like that.
It's a great learning tree to be under.
Yeah, it really is. And he fast tracks me a lot, where I'll be like, hey, what do we think about this guy? And he'll give me 5 reasons why that guy's not a good guy. And I'm like, all right, well, there you go.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So we'll wrap up like earlier. Americanrana right around the corner. And again, announced earlier tonight, we found out the Rock and Roll Express is facing the Butcher and the Blade.
Yeah,
that's going to be a good one.
So far announced, we've got Janela Starr, Dickinson Sakamoto, R.D. Evans, Orange Cassidy, Josh Briggs, John Morrison, Rock and Roll Express, Butcher and the Blade. We know that we're going to have Brian Alvarez and Tom Lawler against Thomas Santella and a partner of his choosing.
I think we can figure out who that might be.
Maybe.
If you're following the story on TV.
EYFBO is going to be in the house. Is that understood?
EYFBO is going to be in the house.
They've been announced. Yeah, we just don't know what
They've been announced, but we don't know.
We'll get there real soon too. But EYFBO has been announced. I believe.
This card's going to be so.
I believe Anthony Green has been announced, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yep.
It's hard to tell who's been announced and who hasn't. Here's the man right now walking over. What's up, Drew?
Had a long night.
But I don't want to leave all this equipment here.
Where's Jerry?
I have no idea what the fuck you want.
Oh. Do you want to leave it with me and I'll wait a little bit for him?
Were you gonna wait anyway?
I'm being interviewed by the Do Dope Shit Squad right now. So
we're doing dope shit.
Interviewing the podcast?
You're on the pod. You're on the pod.
This won't get edited out?
No.
We listen. We're so low on the totem pole. Thanks.
Good.
That we don't even edit. I'm lucky I got this microphone.
So
Bye, guys.
Bye, Tanya.
bye, Tanya. Good night. So long story short, we're getting to where we need to be for Americanrana.
Yeah, Americanrana right around the corner.
Matches to go.
Nice.
And,
and we're all excited, and we're like we said, we're super excited. You're in our backyard, and we're glad to help in any little way we can to get the word out there.
I appreciate you guys hanging posters and stuff like that, because it saved me a day of my life to go do it myself.
Yeah, we'll be getting some more out in the coming weeks as well. Hopefully, we get out there again this weekend. And I want to extend that to September too, if you need that. I know it's not as far of a trip for you to make down there, but
it's all a far trip.
I have family.
Coming to Worcester every week has gotten to be where it's a bit of a haul, but so I'm in the process of opening up a second business as well.
Right, you mentioned that today, yeah.
So that's a bit shorter to get here, so I make sure I work there on Wednesdays.
You are a busy man.
But that's going to be something you guys are going to love.
Really?
Yes.
All right.
Stay tuned.
It's my first time not opening a restaurant. I've opened 8 restaurants.
8?
8.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's my first time not opening a restaurant, so I'm super excited for it.
Okay.
And
we'll stay tuned.
I'd love to talk more about it.
We'll get to that down the line.
We're working out some details, but all of my memorabilia and all of my collectible stuff is something that I've been working towards a goal to accomplish with it all.
Okay.
And that's what I'm going to execute.
Okay.
Very, very interesting.
That's awesome. You got me intrigued.
My curiosity is piqued.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys, I asked if you guys passed through Rhode Island.
we do. We don't.
Because I was gonna go try and do this from my new spot tonight. But, you told me you took $3.95. So.
We can go through. It's a little bit shorter, but listen, we can.
Maybe next week. Maybe if you're here next week after the show, we can.
I think Conrad, who's hiding in the corner because he's kind of microphone shy tonight.
I feel like Conrad's not really a wrestling fan.
Oh no!
I watched the video.
I am probably the hardest critic
Conrad, there's two kinds of fans.
He's too much of a
There's
fan.
asshole Bullet Club fans, and then there's Jeff Hardy, a piece of shit. And that's it. There's no other type of fan.
We have listeners.
Hashtag hot sister.
Hashtag hot sister.
I love it.
Oh my god.
On that note, we can't get any.
And it's just the three of you make up the entirety of the rest of the demographic. So I don't know. Am I an asshole Bullet Club fan or a piece of shit Jeff Hardy fan? I don't know. Which one is it, my man?
We got it.
Yeah, Con, what is it? What is it, Con?
Shades of red.
You didn't think anybody actually listened?
Yeah, right?
Oh God! On that
That
note,
was beautiful.
we're gonna call that a night.
All right,
Thanks
guys.
a lot,
It makes
John.
you laugh, John.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you taking some time
Yeah,
to talk to me.
absolutely. We appreciate it too.
Marco Stunner.
Marco Stunner. How you doing, Marco?
All
right, guys.
Thank you
Have a
very
great
much. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome back. Man, that was fun. I really had a good time with that, especially at the end, busting Conrad's balls. You know, he sat in the corner and didn't really say much as we talked with John there. Really cool to get those cameos in, having Retrosexual AG, Anthony Green stop by, and of course the one and only Drew Cordero. Maybe we'll get him on the pod one of these days and get some more backstory on Beyond and maybe some insight to how some of these shows come about. But that's it for us this week. Remember to subscribe on iTunes and Google Play and Podbean, where all those places where you can find the podcast. And as for the as far as the giveaway for the two sets of tickets goes, what I want you to do is I want you to quote tweet the link that I will be dropping with this podcast. Not the one that automatically comes from Podbean, but the one that I tweet out from the DDS Squad Pod Twitter account at DDS Squad Pod on Twitter, and quote tweet that with "Do Dope Shit," and you'll be entered to win two tickets to Americanrana, July 28th, Foxwoods Resort Casino. Names will be chosen randomly through a randomizer, and you'll get to be there live for the biggest independent show of the year. Independent wrestling show of the year. It's going to be great. It's going to be an amazing time. Like John ran down the card there for you. There's a lot of good matches still to be announced, and I can't wait to hear what they've got for us and everything else. So so like I said, follow along on Twitter at DDS Squad Pod. Subscribe on iTunes and Google Play, and keep an eye out for the link so you can quote tweet with "Do Dope Shit" and enter to win tickets to Americanrana, July 28th, Foxwoods Resort Casino. Thanks for listening. The next pod you'll hear from us will Conrad and I will be heading up to Worcester Wednesday night for Beyond Wrestling Uncharted Territory, episode 15, with Josh Briggs versus one of my favorites, Ethan Page. So we'll talk to you then. And in the meantime, you guys know the drill. Continue to do that dope shit.